This is exciting. I hate having him on. Perhaps his most depressed weekend of his fandom. But it's Will Cain, who, by the way, you can see weekdays every single day on Fox News, The Will Cain Show, 4 p.m. Eastern. Will, it's good to see you again, man.
What is up, Russillo? This is interesting. This is fun. I appreciate the invitation. I am honored. I'm flattered. No, I'm excited to be with you again, man. What's up?
All right. So before we get to this Luka stuff, this tariff stuff is wild.
Yeah, man.
No, I'm kidding. All right. Look, I went through the Open and we've talked about this already. I did the pod. I just wanted your perspective as a lifelong Texan, lifelong Mavs fan. I know that you've been super into it. It's been a couple days. Luka is gone. How do you feel?
Just so bummed. Just so crestfallen. I mean, I feel awful and it doesn't get better. I was at breakfast with some of my buddies this morning and they're like, why do you care so much? I'm like, what happened to you? When did you lose your humanity and your passion? This is what I sign up for, man. Like, we all have the way that we come through, loving sports. Mine is through the prism of fandom, Russillo, and it is fandom through the channels that were a birthright that I was born to. That's the Texas Longhorns, Dallas Cowboys, Texas Rangers, Dallas Stars, and Dallas Mavericks, and that's the way it has been. And I never made a choice. And to see one of my loves gutted, 100% gutted, the spirit and soul ripped out of it. It just feels like a real loss of hope.
Wow, that was intense and efficient. What bothers you the most?
Okay, what bothers me the most is that whoever made this decision, and I always respect it, even when we were together, you talked about I have sources. Meaning you have sources, Russillo. You don't do this through, like I do, the prism of the fan. But on this one, I do know some things. And what I have been told and led to believe is this was really heavily, if not exclusively, driven by Nico. So, I don't want to focus all my fire on Nico Harrison because I don't think it can be completely true that he does a decision like this. We know that there had to be sign-off, but as far as driving the decision, what has me most upset is there is no understanding from whoever made this decision, we'll presume Nico Harrison, that the role Luka played in the psyche and the city of Dallas, and it's singular, and it can't be replaced. And I posted this on X yesterday. Like, it's the type of thing that a championship doesn't just replace. So if I even accept the most, superficial rationales that, this makes us a better basketball team. Charles Barkley says it makes Dallas perhaps the second best team in the West. If I even cared about the X's and O's of that right now, and it worked out in the most optimistic manner possible, and they win a championship this year, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it replaces having an iconic figure who's not just the face of the franchise, but I think, the face of the league. And if not the face of the league now, with some certainty, the face of the league within 5 years. And to rip that out, who's a homegrown dude that we brought over, that had doubt around him. I debated Stephen A. and Max on whether or not they should take DeAndre, or whether or not DeAndre Ayton's a better pick. Or I don't even remember the name of the dude that Sacramento picked second or third. From
Bagley.
That was the type of debate we were having. And it was like, no. We got Luka. We pulled off a heist somehow. The basketball gods gave us this unicorn, and he proved to be everything that you ever wanted. And he just represented more. Honestly, Russillo, he represented more than championships. And I will say this is like the Mavs trading Dirk in 2006. And if the Mavs had won the championship in 07 and 08 without Dirk, it wouldn't mean as much as winning in 2011 with Dirk.
Yeah, you touched on a bunch of good things there. The ownership part of this, because none of this stuff happens. Like the number of times that you'll hear about something and then, like a week later, somebody's like, well, the owner, did or didn't want to do this. Like there's just so many deals that either happen because the owner's like behind it, or a deal that doesn't happen because ultimately everybody in the basketball side, the coaches, the front office are like, we want to do this. The owner goes, you know what? We're not doing that. And that's it. Like, ultimately you work for the owner, even if we believe there's some sort of fake hierarchy of like the GM can tell the guy that actually owns the team that writes his checks that he is going to do something that he doesn't want to do. Maybe early on with owners, and maybe that's the lesson in this. Maybe that the new ownership part of this, even though that whole Cuban timeline has been so strange where it was, wait, you sold the team, but you get to keep running it? Like that doesn't really ever happen. And I don't know that that's even necessarily true, or maybe they were being nice to Cuban for the year or whatever, but it's the opposite of what a new ownership group would want to do in their own backyard. You would think even if Nico's convinced them, hey, he doesn't get it and he's going to age fast and we don't want to pay him all of this money and all these things, I would think most ownership groups in this situation be like, you know what we can't do though, is we can't trade this guy right now. We can't do this because every sales guy is motherfucking the organization right now. All the PR people, like all the community stuff and the money part of it, all the local product here suffers in such a way, like their approval rating, which again, all that stuff can be totally bullshit. And if they have a deep playoff run, maybe it doesn't really matter. I think I saw something where the Instagram page for the Mavs lost hundreds of thousands of followers. I don't know if that was real or not, but the thing that influences so many basketball decisions, the dynamic that I kind of despise, is usually the kind of thing, though, that would prevent an organization from doing something like this because it is so immediately unpopular.
Okay, so from the ownership side of this equation, I'm going to tell you what I think I understand, and that is this. This is an organization, the new ownership, that allows its managers to run their businesses. Whether or not that's the casino business, the hospitality business, and maybe now the basketball business. This is also, I think, something that has taken everyone, shockingly, Russillo, I'm telling you this is true, taking everyone by surprise. They did not expect this level of backlash. One more just to do away with the conspiracy theory. The Mavericks are not moving to Las Vegas. Like this ownership group, by the way, is largely divested from Las Vegas. They don't own the Venetian. They don't own casinos in Las Vegas. And trust me when I tell you that there is a belief widespread that Texas, forget Dallas versus Vegas isn't even a comp. You know, no business owner goes, I think I'm moving from Dallas to Vegas. No, that's not a comparable market decision. But the idea of Texas is a big time investment. You will see gambling legalized in Texas. You will see casinos built in Texas. You will see the Mavericks somehow tied in to all of those things. So that's not happening. I don't think there's any way this is tied to, moving the Mavericks to Vegas. And the NBA was doing them a solid, get Luka to LA and help out our ratings, and you can move the franchise to Vegas. No, that's not real. Russillo, people name their dog Luka here. Like there's not a comp, man. Here's the best I did. I tried to think about this because, me on my thing saying, a championship doesn't heal this wound. I don't know, just 2 or 3 championships? Well, the closest comp I can come up with, besides the hypothetical of them trading Dirk, is Jerry Jones firing Tom Landry in 1988 into 1989. That was a big deal. Like, there are old head, and you and I are old heads now, but Cowboy fans who never forgave Jerry Jones, despite the dynasty of the 90s, just did not forgive him for doing that to an icon. Now, the difference is Tom Landry was really down. Like, the Cowboys were not good in those 2 or 3 years leading up to Jones's purchase of them. Luka is like right now entering his prime, and they just came back from the NBA Finals. So even that comp falls short. I don't know how, from a PR perspective, you recover. And maybe I'm wrong. And I guess I hope I'm wrong. Like, maybe 3 championships. And I know this sounds ridiculous. Maybe 2 championships heals this. But I don't want 2 championships right now. You know what I want? I want Luka to be a Dallas Maverick.
The other thing that I have a hard time with is, like, you want to say Luka, like, he's gotten all these stats, whatever. Like, there's so many other players that have huge numbers and could potentially obtain all these individual accolades. There's going to be a couple guys that make the Hall of Fame where I go, like, cool. The
Right.
fact that you had this finals run just a couple seasons after the Western Conference Finals run, where that team wasn't that good, all right? But they knocked off a really good Phoenix team that had just been to the finals. You look at the Phoenix Suns during that regular season, and for whatever reason, they just took their souls. They take their souls in that game 7. They had no chance against the Warriors. I was going through the other offensive options there, and you're like, Luka dragged this team. And I do think there are conference finals appearances that can be fool's gold and maybe gets a team thinking about themselves in a way that they shouldn't be thinking about themselves. We're like, hey, you guys actually aren't that close and you're not as good as you think you are, even though it says you're one of the Final Four teams still standing. But Luka getting to the finals, again, with a different roster, that quickly after getting to that Western Conference Finals appearance, like tells me that you actually are close. And again, this isn't some empty stat guy. This isn't just the most talented guy in the league, that even with his deficiencies on defense, there wasn't enough happening negatively with his game that put a ceiling on who you were, where I think there's like 5 to 7 other guys in the league where I'm like, oh, cool, he had 30 again. Yeah, I mean, let me know when they're out of the play-in. And that's the part with Nico where it's very clear they were completely over him. And Windhorst, when he did his rant last year during the playoffs, that was like vicious. He made a point today where he's like, you know what's crazy about that? He's like, nobody, or maybe I just saw the clip again. He's like, nobody from Dallas called me to defend their guy. So I think what we're putting together here is that whatever the day-to-day Luka dynamic was, it was still so egregious to Nico and the rest of the group that they were willing to do something like this, where on the outside you're going, you're complaining about this dude as the face of your franchise because you actually have team success. Granted, not the title, but like real runs in recent seasons to point to as this guy is not somebody that gets in the way of a team's success despite his flaws.
So what's wild about that, and he's completely validated today, but is the idea that Nico Harrison is bigger than Luka Doncic. Clearly he is bigger than Luka Doncic because he did this. And if that's because ownership believes in him, so much, or this is their style of management to allow people to make decisions, it's shocking, whatever justification Nico runs out, that it's what's sold. Let's do a couple of them. So the defense thing, that's total nonsense. I know a lot of fans are going to sit there and go, Will, I've watched him get destroyed on I don't care. They were number 3 in the league in defense last year after the trade deadline. After they got Gafford in Washington, they were 3rd in defense. Does that make them perfect and Luka's not a liability on defense in the finals? No. By the way, Boston was better than Dallas. That's the end of that story. I don't care about
Dallas. It was
Dallas's...
also a bad basketball matchup, too, with like the way they would execute. So, sorry, I interrupted, but keep going.
No, but the point is that doesn't cause you to navel gaze. That's not a long look in the mirror. You ran up against a really good basketball team in Boston. So I don't buy the defense thing whatsoever. The conditioning thing, here's the only way. I loved what you said with Bill this weekend. You said, I repeated it at breakfast. I don't care if he's smoking cigarettes while bringing the ball up the court. He's Luka Doncic. I mean, that's perfect. I don't care about his conditioning right now. Now, I do think they worry about his long-term, how he wears long-term. I do think they think, okay, we're 1 year away from the Supermax, $70 million a year. He is clearly not that dedicated to getting in peak physical condition. How does that play? I don't know. 30 is still 5 years away. So for me, I'm like, it'll play fine. I don't care about what he is at 30. But are they worried he's not going to be good at 27, 28? And you're sitting on this deal? I'm curious what you think about this, Russillo, because one of the only things I could come up with, and I posted on X, is, you love the NBA. A lot of people think that I won't because of my politics, but I love the NBA. Specifically, I love the Mavericks. So I don't have a vested interest. I don't have a political desire to kick the NBA in the crotch. But I am capable of reading facts. And the ratings are not good. Quite honestly, Russillo, I rate higher at 4 than the NBA does in prime time. And
whoa, shots fired.
They may beat me in the demo, but I'm going to be honest on that as well. Not by that much. So the point is the ratings are not good for the NBA. Okay, all the people go, well, kids consume the NBA different, TikTok. You don't monetize social media in the same way you monetize a TV contract. So you have to ask, at some point, is there a correction in the TV revenue market? like the NHL had a reset in the mid-2000s when their salaries got out of control. And you say, okay, well, if that's coming for the NBA, are these supermax deals at $70 million a year unsustainable if the current economics of the NBA don't continue? Maybe they do continue, maybe they don't. ESPN has an endless appetite for live sports programming. So I don't know, but that's the only thing I can come up with. But even at that, Russillo, this ownership group is loaded. Like, they've got a lot of money. So I don't think they're a penny pinching ownership group worried about the black and red of a financial spreadsheet into the future.
I have more work to do on the ratings thing, because I think at times the way the ratings cycle gets treated is there'll be this downturn, right? And then that downturn is supposed to tell you the future, right?
Yeah.
Because remember when the NFL had a dip, it was, it's concussions, right? Concussions were going to end football, and no kids were ever going to play football again. I think you and I were doing shows back then, and I was like, have any of you ever been to the South? Okay. Like, I think people are still going to play football. And then it was because it was Kaepernick, right? And then it was because it started to become like a bit of a political divide, where if you were on the right, you wanted to see the ratings go down a little bit because it kind of justified some of your political beliefs. And I just felt like that kind of falls to this like polling of one stuff that'll happen. Be like, oh, my uncle doesn't watch it anymore.
Both sides,
like, okay.
Though. You remember both sides, because you remember the debate about, the NBA is going to replace the NFL. It became a proxy culture debate. But all I'm saying
that was another Cuban thing. That was another Cuban thing. Cuban was trying to say that.
Yeah, he drove that. So did First Take.
All right. So like when we look at the ratings part of it, I need a little bit more data, but ultimately, because I am working on something on this, I'm not done yet. And it sounds like as an NBA guy, I can potentially be pushing it back against the idea that there's declining ratings. But here's what we do know. Any declining rating or any declining rating forecast is irrelevant to the bigger business deals, because you could have, as long as you have the live rights programming, you have all of these games, you can say, all right, year to year, like this is where we're at, go back 10 years, this is where we're at. And like, okay, why would you invest this? They just did the TV deal. So to me, the TV deal and the ratings and the fact that it's been renewed at triple again, and it was beyond the projections, because there was a long time we were like, why are some of these teams changing hands? Oh no, is the TV deal coming in way lower than they thought? Or some of these guys deciding to get out now because this is the decline. The franchise acquisition bubble is finally starting to happen. And then none of that happened because the TV deal came in massive. So the reason I think it's important to go through all this stuff is, okay, fine. Maybe it is a declining product in the way that we equate like what is successful and what is not successful based on, I think, at times, some very outdated and domestic television numbers. But I can't sit here and say that anybody's wrong that's looking at it that way. The point is $350 million to Luka is irrelevant because the money's already backed in. In 4 years from now, of whatever that extension would have been, Luka's making less. The same way the quarterback renewal cycle happens. We're like, I can't believe Jared Goff is making all of this money. Look at that guaranteed money. And then 3 years later, you're like, that contract isn't even that bad anymore. At 25, whatever your concerns are about Luka, there's no financial conditioning argument that I would hear because here's the thing, then you could just trade him. So I don't know if you want to follow up on that, because I still have a couple other questions.
All I would say on that is, I think ultimately I'm in the same place as you. I'm spitballing, trying to find a rationale that's for something that is on its face unjustifiable and irrational. The money side of it, and you're right. Well, first of all, the league's primary revenue source is TV contracts. So if viewership goes down, you would think at some point the value of those TV contracts would go down, but it hasn't happened, to your point. They keep going up.
Yeah.
And that's in part because TV itself, cable is declining, and live sports and to some extent news are the last holdouts. And so kind of their land grab becomes more valuable as everything else goes down. You do wonder at some point, does it catch up even to those highest points on the mountain? But again, this is why I don't disagree with what you're saying. Luka's $350 million deal would be within the scope of a current TV rights deal. So you're not going to pay bad for it. You've already got that revenue baked in. So I'm with you. Again, it's going to take me back to, I think Nico, I'm going to let you take this where you want. It's clear that Nico saw Luka as two things. I think you're right. He saw him as a problem. Okay. I don't think everything was as hunky-dory behind the scenes as you'd want to believe. Whatever that means. How you manage a star, your relationships with stars, even Luka's relationship with other stars. I'm not suggesting there's anything bad there, but maybe I've been led to believe it's not as rosy as it always looks. And secondarily, then, Nico saw Luka as an asset, not as an icon. And there's a difference. And so that asset, he was willing to flip. And maybe he's right. Maybe they're now better on defense. And maybe they have a 2 to 3 year window where they're, the Mavericks aren't gone. They're going to be very competitive, presuming these 31-year-olds don't get injured. But the problem is he's not an asset. He's not just another player, even a very good one. He's an icon. And I don't think he's just an icon in Dallas. I think he is a league, and that's obvious now. Look, he's going to be the face of the league because he's a Laker even more now, and you just traded away the icon of the NBA.
Two things that we finish up here. What I cannot understand is if you were going to make him available, why you would make him available to only one team. And the answer to that, as I've talked to enough teams and I talked about in the open, is that Nico Harrison looked at Anthony Davis as like the guy he wanted more than everybody else. But it still does not justify, like, you couldn't get another pick. You couldn't figure out a way to, like, hey, I need just a little bit more. I need a sweetener here. I'm going to get destroyed. I'm trading this guy. Like, give me a little something here. If you had heard, I already know the answer to this, but if you had heard he had canvassed the league for a couple of weeks and we had the normal cycle of a Shams or a Windhorst up on TV going like, there are rumblings that Luka's available. Then we get like the 2-week runway to talk about all the different hypotheticals. Like, you almost get to like have an appetizer to that moment on Saturday night where you're bracing yourself for it. Like a content appetizer. If you had known that this wasn't just about one team he negotiated with, which I can't understand, would you feel better about it today?
Well, the one team thing feeds the conspiracy back to the ratings. Oh my God, we got to get ratings up. Make Luka a Laker. I don't generally believe. Well, do I believe in conspiracies? I'll let the audience decide whether or not I believe in conspiracies. You want to just do 30 minutes on that for a minute, Russillo? Should we just dig into a few?
We're going to make that a YouTube only.
Okay. All
Maybe
right. That's for subscribers. Yeah.
You have to really want this content.
I guess, like intellectually, like theoretically, yeah, that would have gone down easier. But in the end, I wouldn't have wanted, and that wouldn't have been any good either. If you had said this is kind of personal to me. If you had said they have traded him to Milwaukee for Giannis, maybe I could get behind that eventually. Maybe. That is the one. Because I really like Giannis. There's nothing else. I don't care how many first-round picks. He's Luka Doncic.
Last thing. As we said at the beginning, we'll be on every day, Fox News, 4 Eastern. I was with you early in the ESPN days. Like, who's this fill-in? We've told the story before, like, full head of hair. Shit, he's pretty smart. I think he's smarter than I am. And then we became friends. And we did a bunch of shows together. And who knows, like, things had gone a different way. Maybe we would have done shows together for a long time. But we both had goals. And, I'm looking at you, realizing that you're reaching a goal. Something you're like, am I one of these guys? Like, you have those moments you're like, could I potentially? And then once you decide, like, yeah, I think I can be one of those guys. Well, you have now become one of those guys. What does this mean to you?
Well, I kind of know what you mean by I've become one of those guys. I mean, I'm not doing faux humility when I tell you I've never thought about it in that way. And I'll be personal with you and the audience. And you and I texted and I said, look, to do what we do, you have to have a combination of a couple of things, which is narcissism, insecurity, and ambition. But I, of course, am ambitious. And to have my name on a show and have my own hour on Fox News is incredibly flattering. And it's somewhat of a celebratory moment. But the real celebration for me is that I've been making a commute. Dude, I haven't unpacked my DOP kit for 9 years. That includes my time back to ESPN when I would go spend 2 or 3 nights in a hotel at the Homewood Suites in Bristol. I guess technically it's Southington. But I have lived out of a Adopt Kit for 9 years, except for the 1 year of COVID. And I moved back to Texas 5 years ago, where I'm from, and I live in Dallas, and this is my life, and this is where I'll die. I'm never moving, at least not as a primary residence. And to get to do this from Dallas is the real victory for me. That's what it is. They made my dreams come true when it comes to, I get to go to my son's Friday night football games. I'm not missing soccer games anymore. I'm not commuting to New York. That's it. Everything else, Russillo, is icing. And as for our friendship, stick around because maybe I'll put you in my cabinet.
Maybe you have bigger aspirations than I thought. Maybe I don't know. I might have to get some sort of hair update, some transplant.
I'm thinking Secretary of Commerce. That's where I'm leaning right now. Secretary of Commerce, Ryen Russillo.
I don't know. What does that guy do?
Something big. Tariffs?
Last question. What's the biggest difference between ESPN and Fox News?
God, you know what's interesting? This came up this weekend. I was at one of my kids' soccer games and somebody brought up hate and vitriol. And I was like, you know what, man? I've got pretty thick skin at this point. The most I ever got is not in politics and not at Fox. It's at ESPN. And that's by nature of a lot of things and topics and times that we were all going through from 16 to 20. But I think, what's the biggest difference? From an audience perspective, it's there's an alternative media to what I have to say on Fox, who will really, really nefariously cut what you have to say and recharacterize it, but you just let go. I'd let go of that. I had friends at ESPN. Everybody wants to think that I didn't, that everybody hated me. Maybe they did behind my back, not to my face. I had friends at ESPN. I loved my 5 years at ESPN. I loved working with you, talking. My favorite thing about what we do is whether or not I have a relationship off camera. When the microphones go off, do we have more to say? Do we have more to hang out? Ceruti will testify this. Every commercial break, I went into the control room. So did you, and I remember this. And I'd hang out with the guys. Bubba, Ceruti, we talked. I loved being with the fellas. I certainly had that at Fox, but now a lot of my connections have gone on to run the Secretary of Defense or the Department of Transportation. But it's been real similar at Fox. I have great relationships at both places, and that's my favorite thing. It's LeBron and D Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami. I now know the value of working with your friends.
So maybe I should have asked this in a better way, because I think it's the headline of like, oh, what's the biggest difference? And I think that the difference, at least the way that you're treated, is that if somebody's watching you on Fox News, they want to watch you on Fox News. Where I felt true. And I even warned you against this, the role that you were being teed up on at ESPN,
right?
At First Take, I was like, hey, just be careful. Like, you can't go on and be this actually isn't racist guy every day of the week. Like, because then it becomes like, hey, because I just know how, because they did it to me one time. They were like, hey, this Yawkey Way thing, do you want to defend them keeping the name of the street Yawkey Way? I was like, no. I was like, I don't give a shit. I was like, why would I? And they were like, really? They're like, you're from Boston, the Yawkeys. I went, well, I'll go on. And then I was watching it happen and I was like, oh no. And then we talked about it a little bit, but you're so good on the show and it's this massive platform. So I think when the setup is, hey, we're going to roll out Will Cain for this, there's no way anybody's going to like you. There's no way anybody that's watching First Take regularly is going to be like, I like him. Okay. So I you know what I mean? I mean, I'm not saying you have a 0 approval rating, but it's, you're digging yourself out of a hole at the start of every single segment, I think is. And maybe it looks like you still want to disagree with
my wife.
That's fine.
No, I don't. My wife used to tell me,
okay.
Hey, she used to say to me, why don't you start? Because, also there's the design of First Take, which is, the design is get to the disagreement. The First Take is not fake, except it does away with the pleasantries of normal conversation that you could call fake, that most of us do. So in other words, like, don't go, well, I see your point. Honestly, Max did too much of that, and that's why it didn't work for Max on First Take. I see your point. Get straight to the part where you don't see their point. My wife used to be like, why don't you just say, like, at the beginning of some of these really contentious conversations, I see your point, or I get that. And here's where I agree. And then go in. And I'm like, no, like I'm going straight for the counterpunch to the nose right off the bat. I mean, because I do have a deep disagreement. And so we might as well get to it.
I actually like that. And I think that's why the show and the dynamic works. But I think the question I'd like a better answer on, because I didn't ask it the right way, is that are there more similarities perhaps? Are there more similarities navigating the dynamic of becoming somebody who's a regular part of the television rotation? Is it just like every other place in TV?
I'm going to answer that two ways. You're going to find both unsatisfactory because I think I know what you want, but I don't think I can give it to you. I think I have a lot of self-awareness. I know you do. Boy, you think about this stuff a lot. You think about it too much. But I think about it a lot too. Like, how does this work? How did I do? Why did that not work? Which is good. It's like watching game tape of yourself, which I don't. I don't think you do either. I don't watch game tape, but I do think about what I said and how it played and these kind of things. But I don't change, Russillo. That's the problem.
I listened to, by the way, the other day, I mistakenly hit play on one of my own episodes, and it had been a really long time since I'd listened to myself do an entire show. So I was like, you know what? It's been a long time. Listen to the whole show. And then I got done and I went. I was like, I'm fucking awesome.
The funny thing is, I don't know if I believe that or not. It's hard sometimes with Russillo sarcasm. Was he super hard on himself or was he super proud? The thing about it is, though, at the end of that, I know this sounds like I'm patting myself on my back, but I know myself at this point. I have one currency. One, it's authenticity. Believe it or not, I don't want to be the smartest dude. I just want to be real and I want to be me. So I'm going to do that in both places. And that's the same. And that's just the way it is. Let the chips fall where they may. You're also asking me about something else. It's behind the scenes stuff. I was never more laid back, Russillo, than I have been. When I went to law school, Russillo, I stopped caring about grades. And it was the most liberating 3 years of my life. And I learned more. I just stopped. I didn't want a big law firm job. I wasn't trying to make $150,000 my first year out of law school. I didn't want that. So there was no point in me trying to be law review. So I didn't. And I learned so much. When I got to Fox, I have not, of course I'm ambitious. So I'm not going to pretend like I didn't have conversations or like, where is this leading? And do I have a path? But I didn't angst about it. I was pretty laid back about, I'm doing this. I'm enjoying my job. We'll see where it goes. And there's a lot of reasons decisions are made, to your point. I don't know them all. And I was as surprised as anybody when this came down, but it really helped being laid back and not trying to white knuckle the steering wheel.
That ended up being a great answer because I don't know if it's something where it is the surrounding area, not really nailing the terminology here, but you could say like, is it the dynamic? Is it the setting? Is it the people? Or is it where you're at? And really the answer is usually like where you're at. Because for me, ESPN was an angst-filled experience. And is that specific to them? Or is that about your own security and kind of where you're at in your own head? And it's kind of mirrors your law school thing of like just the Zen moment of, all right, I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff anymore. And I'm going to be fine. And it's an awesome place to get to. It usually takes a little bit longer. And it usually takes even longer if you're going to try to be on TV in front of everybody.
Right. Well, it took a while. I mean, I'm no overnight success. I've been doing this for 14, 15 years. I'm 49 years old. Are you 50? You're 50. That must suck. Sorry, man. No,
well,
your birthday's right after mine, I think. We're real close.
Yeah.
You April?
August.
See, we don't know each other that well. I just knew it started with an A. So I'm a little older.
Close. You had two choices.
But I'll tell you two things. These seem to work against one another. One of my friends told me one time, hang around the hoop. See what kind of rebound bounces your way. Most people take themselves out of the game. Most people strap on their own suicide vests and blow up their own opportunities. And I think that's true. I think that's really true. So hang around the hoop. The second is you and I talked here and there, but you're an inspiration in that you're an example of what is increasingly true for everyone who does what we do. You don't have to white knuckle this. You don't have to worry about backroom politics. You don't worry about who likes you and who doesn't like you. You don't worry about the tap on the shoulder because you can go build out there on your own like you have done, at Spotify.
Yeah, but again, it wasn't going to happen until I had gone through all the other stuff to go, okay, well, this isn't the way to do it. And then you want to blame everybody else and all these different things. But look, none of that. We've talked about that. We don't need to share that a ton with the audience because I think I've done a million versions of it already. But I'm really happy for you. You deserve it. You're terrific on television. Like I said, I'm happy, and I'm also biased because I got to know you personally. So thanks,
Well, thank you, man.